Welcome back, everyone, to Between Rounds, a podcast focused on all the current happenings in the Deadlock scene, heading into our hero tier list segment today, so you know what's good and what's not for the current week. I'm ZP here with Jake, and Jake, we have to tell everyone ahead of time, we did not pre-prep anything. We are just going into this. They'll get to see it all get made in front of them as we argue and debate a little bit over who's good and who's not.
We're going to have to fight it out. I mean, there's a lot of shakeups this week. And so I think there's a lot of people going to be interested, like with all the new changes in the map, like what should we be playing? What are the new prio? What kind of new characters should you learn if you want to take your game to the next level is playing Deadlock right here.
All right. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to go directly into it. S tier. Jake, what would we consider to be S tier here? You know, we're kind of saying a new format. It's our first show going over the hero tier list. To me, S tier is the stuff where it's even a little bit beyond first pick, first ban. It's almost on the level of if you give this up, you are in trouble, especially on a competitive level, right? Like it's something where you just don't want to face it, or it is like true, maybe ultimate first pick, first ban priority.
My first thought is 7, based on all the map changes with there's being so many jungle camps close together, a lot more opportunity to farm. And, I think people are hitting those ultra late games more consistently now, where 7 really has always thrived. And, this is a good patch for 7. I think with, maxing the third skill, then maxing into the ultimate. He's a legitimately really powerful team fighter, really good at securing objectives and like winning these critical team fights. And the new map, I think, just took him to the next level, allowed that farming capacity to really be borne out in even high level games.
Fully agree. I think, especially given the fact that he was banned out more than we even got to see him play in the last week of play. I mean, look, with the new map, with what 7's good at, with how people were already valuing him before the new map, I agree. I think 7 is in the tier of you either want to play him or you want to ban him. You don't want to be against him. But also, in part for the meme, but also because it checks out. It's not the S for 7 by first letter tier, but it might as well be, because the other hero, Jake, I'd put up there right now would be Sinclair. No one wants to play against Sinclair right now, and it's because Sinclair, I think, has this combination of very, very good early laning on top of the fact that it's high damage, and the fact that audience participation really creates a lot of problems for team comps and how a lot of team fights go into play. And, the one time we did see Sinclair go through, thinking back to, Deadlock Fight Night in North America, it didn't end well for Hydra Nation when they let the Sinclair through.
Yeah, I think I like that you highlight audience participation, because I think sometimes just like team fight planning around an unknown ultimate or it could be any of your teammates' ultimates. I mean, that's really awkward to do, really difficult to play around. I've also seen a lot of people making really insane macro movements with the clone, being able to like go for a play, and then you're just like teleporting miles away just before the duration ends. And there's like no possible way to catch you. So that ability to juke out, I think, looks really sick. And I think it's just a very high skill cap hero that took a little bit for people to figure out, but as they got better and better, I mean, this is a hero that you kind of want to learn if you're playing ranked right now, because I feel, he has a huge skill cap, a really high potential to make plays. So watch what the pros do and learn from them, because Sinclair can be a huge part of your success, I think, in this patch and in previous patches too, frankly. But I think, stocks on the rise, certainly for Sinclair. Let me think. Is there anyone else we want to put in S tier?
I'm on the fence for one hero.
What do you think?
What do you think of Holiday? Holiday right now, because Holiday was valued over Paradox this entire week, right? Teams would pick Holiday over Paradox, and Paradox used to be sort of the ultimate first pick, first ban hero. I don't know if that's top of A tier or S tier though, relative to how good 7 and Sinclair were, because people were okay playing against Holiday. They weren't really okay playing against 7 and Sinclair.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you in the top of A. I don't think she changes the game so radically, but I think despite there being some actual patch notes for Holiday of I think just some minor nerfs on the jump pad, but in the end, I think the vertical mobility that Holiday offers, and most of the time Holiday was competing with Paradox. We talked about this a lot in Deadlock Fight Night, how it's you need one of these initiation pickoff heroes. But I think the vertical mobility being core to Holiday's kit is massive on this new map, where there's just way more vertical team fighting going on. I think a lot more engagements with that third dimension. And I think that has really buffed Holiday in terms of her priority, how strong she is in competitive play, but also in ranked. I mean, there's a lot of individual playmaking that this hero can pull off. And I feel like the new map really plays into those strengths, especially as people have gotten a lot better at Holiday in recent weeks.
Solomon had some good stats here, which might arm twist me in the S tier. DFN 15 stats for Holiday, 100% pick ban rate, 100% first round pick ban rate, 100% win rate of all the games. That seems
Yeah,
kind of
maybe
S
that
tier to
is
me.
better than maybe we're
Yeah.
not giving it enough credit, right? I mean, in fairness, Seven was probably like played way less because he was like the team who didn't get first pick was perma banning him. But I think it's fair to think Holiday she might be a tier above anyone else. Like she might be in this S tier. And usually in tier lists, I feel like the S tier is where you get the spikiest results. You get like one hero could be completely out of control, but still others are in S and in our game defining right now.
I think for me though, Jake, that's the end of the S tier. I don't think anyone
Mm,
else goes up there. I think
agreed.
the A tier is more okay, they're really good. You're going to see them in every game, and oftentimes you do want to prioritize them early in the draft. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting because I think you can really argue quite heavily for a lot. I think the one hero I'm going to nominate here just because it was in I think just about every game and also highly effective would just be Wraith. I
Yeah.
feel like Wraith, you can't really take Wraith away, and
She's
arguably
just
top of the A tier.
she's just powerful, right? Like I think the massive nuking potential, her gun just does so much damage. And then of course the ultimate I think is really great at like winning 1v1s. It's not the complete lockdown kill that it was before, but it's still insane. If somebody tries to kill you on Wraith and you have ult online, I mean, good luck to them. They're gonna need it. It's real trouble dealing with this Wraith. And then of course I think the TP ability is just so consistently powerful. Again, like it adds that vertical mobility. So I no disagreements here. Wraith, a very boilerplate A tier hero. Always going to be pretty good to see. The next hero though, I would want to put in A tier is I would put Great Talon up in A tier right now.
Ooh.
I think Talon, I think like the range nukes are really powerful. I think there's a lot of, open air vertical fights around the rooftops when people are playing for buffs. And I think Talon's ability to participate in side lanes with the ultimate, like you mentioned in our map review earlier, which by the way, if you haven't seen the video, go check that out elsewhere on the channel. But I think Talon's ability to, be present in fights very far from her current location with the owl is going to be something that comes at a premium on this new map, something that you're going to want more and more of. And on top of that, she has the flight ability of just, jumping straight up to the high grounds and continuing engagements, being able to slip out of trouble by escaping to a rooftop.
So I know we're going to eventually put Paradox somewhere in the A tier because Paradox hasn't fallen off that much. But if you're going to lead with the Great Talon, I'm going to see the Great Talon and raise you a Mo and Krill. Because when you think about how Melee Creeps was able to take down Hydra Nation, it was with a lot of Mo play. Mo was incredibly effective, was also at times a high priority ban in EU. I feel like Mo kind of goes, it's felt like more of a team specific pick, but at this point, Jake, I almost feel like it's hard to deny the power, especially when, NA is literally one off Mo and Krill being picked second by Melee Creeps.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mo and Krill, you can look for jungle invades on some of those new camps that are just open in the enemy side of the map. And Mo is, I think, one of the more durable characters at stealing some jungle camps real quick, and then, getting out of trouble without being caught and punished. And I think that's a pretty powerful utility. But also, because there's less towers on the map, there's more opportunity to slip in behind people, show up and gank them with combo. And you could kind of like rinse and repeat that playstyle, I think, a little bit more consistently than you could before with the 4-lane map. So I think even for ranked play, you might want to be dual queuing with a friend to be like setting up combos together and make sure you're communicating in voice chat. But I think very much Mo can be a really strong pick who's improved even on his previous status by this new map and by just there being less towers, less objectives blocking your path to a gank you'd like to be on.
All right. Where do we go next here? Do we go for the solid, or do we just break it up a little bit and go a hero that's definitely not A tier? It's your pick now. What do you got?
I'm actually maybe this is a hot take. I think Bebop is a lot worse than before on the new map. I think the new map is bad for Bebop comparatively to the old map. I feel the middle 2 lanes on the 4-lane map were pretty sick for Bebop to like. There's a lot of long sight lines for hooks. And I think there's just relatively a bit less of them now. I do think Bebop is still such a high skill hero that in ranked, if you're like a really good Bebop player, you're going to make this work. You're going to have huge impact in the game. But I think it's just a little bit less consistent than he was on the old maps. I feel like Bebop, maybe is it in like pro play, maybe it's like a C tier, but I think maybe ranked it's like more of a B. Like it's very skill dependent, I think. So I'm hesitant to say he won't be good in ranked, where you got a really strong player who's making plays, they get out of control on Bebop and kind of run the table on the game.
So you're thinking more bottom of B tier, which we will fill out, but if we're gonna put B, also we just keep following this
by the hero names.
Of,
this is a tier list of hero name first letter. Very informative, very good for the audience.
No, don't put Abrams next here yet. He might not be there. We haven't decided. But
speaking of Abrams, ZP, what do you think? Where do you think Abrams is at? What do you see for the big blue boy?
I think for Abrams, it's like he's good, and obvious. I think there's a world where you think about how Hydra Nation was playing them, where it's
Mm.
like people almost take Abrams as like a support enabler role to an extent, right? To like set up ganks and have more early pressure. But would you ever pick him early in a draft over a lot of the other options right now? Maybe Pacific was a little bit pre-patch, but we're on the new patch. I I definitely don't think it's A tier. I don't think Abrams is at the level in being played quite as impactfully as stuff in the A tier. I don't think he's necessarily C tier though either. And what's probably going to be going to C tier. I think he's somewhere in B. That's kind of where I'm at. So we'll break the no Abrams at A tier. I think he goes B tier right now. Still very good. I also I don't know. Do you think he's hurt a little bit by the duo solo lane change? Because there was a point he was one of the better solo laners in the game.
Actually, I was just thinking about something with the souls that I think actually really hurts Abrams right now in the game, which is that one of the changes on the souls in this patch is that even though you don't have to last hit and it's only about denying, in general, last hitting the soul orb itself is a lot easier than before if you're actively watching because it always comes like straight up off the creep. Whereas in the last patch, it was a little bit more random, like left, right, middle. And the shotgun heroes, I think, had a big advantage last hitting faster because they have a shotgun. It's just you don't have to be that precise last hitting the orb. But now I think with this new mechanic, it doesn't really help all that much to have a shotgun because even the Infernuses and the Wraiths of the game, they pretty much know where the soul orb's going to be. It's not a huge issue for them to hit the shot really quickly. And so it's more of a reaction time test than an aim test. And I actually think that hurts Abrams, where before he was pretty insane at like denying souls and hitting every last hit because the shotgun was just so insanely consistent. And now I think in general, that dominance of shotgun heroes in the very early laning phase to hit all the denies, I think is going to be reduced significantly compared to the last patch. So which I don't know if that's the end of the world for Abrams. Like you said, I think there's still very much a place for him. But I think especially in ranked, this is probably going to hurt him pretty badly where you don't see very much support Abrams in ranked, right? People want to build the carry. They want to, get the gun damage and, get out of control and just like run the enemy team down. And I feel like that's going to be a little bit harder to get that snowball rolling since like your early laning phase won't be as dominant as it previously was due to that soul change.
Well, this will be a quick hit because we haven't really seen a lot of him getting played. And also, I think it is somewhat accurate. And while it's tempting to be like, oh, Dynamo in D tier because it continues the trend, I think Dynamo's probably in C right now. Dynamo, it's I think it's somewhat telling when you look at the meta and teams would rather run no support than run Dynamo or McGinnis at the moment. Like, it's they either run Kelvin or Ivy or they run no support, and we've seen just Dynamo and McGinnis get largely neglected, right? Which maybe leads us to where you put McGinnis right now, but I feel like it's hard to justify Dynamo being anything other than C tier given the fact that he's just simply not picked.
And I think McGinnis is a great transition because think about this 3-lane map, with less objectives on the map. I think there's maybe like the early Guardians, McGinnis can be pretty good at pressuring them down, but there's just much less like rat side pushing on the side walkers. I feel like that's much riskier now. They have higher HP. They're more easily defensible. And so I think McGinnis, where previously a lot of times you could like just suicide push lanes, die for objectives, and be really impactful overall. I just feel like that playstyle is really out of favor right now. And although some of her skills are still powerful, it just hurts overall since I think the game is a little bit less focused on objective snowballing in the early game. And so I think McGinnis has taken a huge hit from that. Maybe C tier as well. I honestly, what do you think, ZP? Do you think there's anyone in D tier? I feel like the game is actually pretty well balanced right now in the sense I don't know that there's a character that is like really terrible. Even Dynamo and McGinnis, you can absolutely make these characters work if you're good at them and ranked and you like know what you're doing. You can find a play style or a build that like puts it all together.
It's all relative. I think maybe it kind of depends on where you view Viper, but I'm also kind of the camp that like Viper strikes me as one of those heroes that's probably way more powerful than has really been tapped. Like, I think it's given the slide mechanic to begin with, there's a learning curve. So do I feel like Viper is like so bad that it would actually be D tier relative to everything else? No, I mean, Viper might have to go at the very end right now just because it is by far like the least picked hero and has been as invisible as everything else. But yeah, I don't know if I'd go too far beyond that.
So I think we put McGinnis in C. And
Yeah.
then we'll have to come back to Viper. How about Calico? She's next up on the top left there, and I think she's really really strong on her debut, and then has kind of gone up and down in the rankings a little bit, with some weeks being a little bit less prioritized, other weeks seeing like super top prio. Where do you see Calico right now, ZP?
I got her in the latter half of A tier. I think she's
Mm-hmm.
used by too many good teams too frequently. I mean, you think about what Virtus Pro in particular, like usually will do with Calico, right? Like they make it work very effectively. Was still a very favored pick in Pacific on the old patch. I think also you think about the new map and the ability to be sneaky. Like Ava form, I think is even better at setting
That's a good
plays
point.
up. And also, I think she's not bad at all in a duo lane too, and adding pressure. Like she's one of the higher pressure duos you can have in a game right now that I think is more focused on the early to mid game. She's got to be A tier. It's kind of a matter of where you put her in. I don't think she was as definitive to play styles as much as like a Mo was in the last week, but she's got to be A in my book.
Yeah, and I mean that also brings up for me Yamato being, I think in some sense competing with Calico a little bit for this idea of like frontline initiator that can actually survive when the initiation goes down. Yamato with the ultimate and Calico with all of her skills, but I guess primarily the ultimate as well, having that ability to like block stuns or evade damage in Calico's case. Do you think this is or unseated Yamato at all in that like frontline carrier role? Do you think she's been relegated to B tier, or is Yamato still A?
Yamato's hard to place because I think Yamato more than any other hero got hit by the solo lane change because Yamato was one of the
Good point.
absolute best solo laners. It's not like she's bad in duo lane, but her ability to get far ahead was like really ramped up by the fact that she would just crush like a solo lane and then kind of have more time to like take a lane to herself, get ahead and go from there. Even players like Hydration, right? Like we saw Hydration on Yamato. Hydration had trouble getting full ahead on Yamato. Pashi Pop had to wait until like middle to late game to get ahead on Yamato. I mean, I think she's still insane if she gets ahead, but I think her ramps to going there are much harder. So I think for me, even though it may be sacrilege, I have her either back of A tier or beginning of B tier. Is kind of where I'm ranking her right now.
I still want to put her at the end of A. I still think
Yeah.
this character, I think just being able to full block stuns for a long time in the late game is really crazy. The being able to, I mean, even if you think about it from an objective perspective, being able to secure, parries or last hits on the rejuve with the ultimate is pretty unique. There's only a couple other native sources of that unstoppable effect in the game, and Yamato's probably like the most consistent ability to actually leverage that and be really successful in the team fight. But I think you make a good point. I think this she's definitely been hit. She was a solo lane dominator, and now she's kind of. I think people are still going to take a second to find her place in the dual lane, find the build that looks the best for her. With her right, like you were saying, you can't necessarily expect her to snowball out of control.
Here's a question. Maybe this goes back to the idea of like maybe there is a hidden S tier hero and we can get some stats from Solomon, but Kelvin is by far, I think, the most valued support. Is the only support that is reliably getting banned if a team isn't picking it, and is the only support that is getting like very highly first picked. Given that he is by far the best within his role, is that justification potentially to be S tier for Kelvin?
It's a tough call, but I feel he's not as game breaking, let's say, as some of the other characters in S tier. But I do take your point, and I do think Kelvin is maybe the top of A, because even something like Wraith, as good as she is, there's probably a little bit more contention of the Kelvin pick, whether people are banning it or sometimes starting to take it in the first phase before that like second wave of bans come in. I mean, I think Kelvin really has a unique ability to like have insane heal sustain, right? You think about comboing with some of these heroes, like the Shivs, the Calicos, anyone who wants to like tank up and like go in, take an engagement and get pumped full of heals. Kelvin is going to really take those heroes to the very next level. And I think that's a huge factor. Speaking, by the way, of Shiv, this Shiv is such a challenging hero to rate with like EU, basically like casting Shiv to the side completely. NA still picking it for a while, then, dropping a little bit. Where do you see Shiv right now, ZP?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, it's kind of like I think it's very close in a way to Yamato, but like a little bit worse given the fact that we haven't seen him get picked as much. And I think even the games where he's won and been picked, I don't necessarily. It hasn't been Shiv just being the star of the show. It's kind of Shiv is kind of our team has gone ahead and now he will help us stay ahead type of situation. Right now, I'd say top of B.
Yeah, I'm with you on top of B. I'm kind of curious to see if the new map helps him at all with there being, each jungle creep is worth 10% less souls, but there's many more jungle camps. I wonder if that helps Shiv like maintain a high rage meter more often, or some subtle effects like that that'll take a few weeks to be borne out in the patch. But escalating exposure was also nerfed, and so I think you really do want to rely a bit more on the physical damage for Shiv in particular. So yeah, I like Shiv on top of B. I think he's a little bit more limited, but I think he can still be super effective for players who know what they're doing. Thinking about this same concept of Shiv as like this frontlining aggressive damage hero, I think Geist is like for sure A tier.
Yes.
I'm just curious about where she should be in A tier. I'm kind of thinking it's for me it's either above or below Wraith. That's kind of where I'm looking at Geist. I think especially in EU, Geist has been super high prio like pretty much every game I feel like she's being played.
She's vital. She's usually picked in the 3rd or 4th spot, but she's part of so many people's key team comps. And you think too, the Hibernation series where that one went, right? Where it was effectively Pashi Pop, I believe, like had an incredible run where you just ran the Geist down middle, one middle lane, and then like 8 jungle, because she's pretty good at eating jungle too.
She's a very fast farmer and really puts the farm to use early in the game, keeps the pressure on.
Yeah,
I'm going to say
Geist,
maybe weaker than Wraith though. Like, it's such a tough call.
I think weaker than Wraith. I think it's arguable versus talent stuff, but I would say Talon goes later in the draft, and Talon isn't as crucial to like what people run. Geist is just picked, period, right? 60% win rate, so she's mortal, unlike Holiday, who is 100% pick rate and often first ban. But yeah, I think this is a fair spot for Geist from what we've seen. Now, we're also not at the point of where do we put Paradox? Because Paradox is still like very highly valued. And when Holiday is banned, the next playmaker up is usually Paradox, right? Like, however, I do think in terms of gameplay impact, Jake, I feel like I'd rather be going against a Wraith, or rather going against a Paradox and going against a Wraith a lot of the time. Like, I don't know. I feel like Wraith has been more of the linchpin to like teams winning games than Paradox, even though Paradox is like really highly valued. So this is a tough one for me.
I mean, it's a challenge because these heroes don't necessarily compete against each other, like Paradox versus Wraith. They're just such different heroes.
Yeah.
But I would kind of put Paradox somewhere around Great Talon, maybe a little bit better than Great Talon. I do still think this ability to initiate, find a pick off is just so valuable in high level Deadlock right now. The top Paradox players are doing a ton of damage in their own right as well. And so it sort of has like this semi-carry attribute to it that I think is pretty impactful. And like you said, I just think this character, it feels like it's never going to be forgotten in Deadlock, like it's just the swap is so powerful. You have like the damage setup. You just have such great utility, defensive, offensive. You really are a really flexible and great addition to any team comp, more or less. I feel like Paradox just sort of undeniably in the middle of A tier feels right for her right now.
Okay, let's swap it up and go like to the other end of the spectrum in terms of where heroes gonna play. Hayes got played, and it looked pretty good from TF2 boomers. Like Goober looked very solid on the Hayes, but overall Hayes not really valued. What got picked, it was kind of the Spirit Hayes build. And while there's potential, I don't think Hayes comes anywhere close to A tier. And I think even the B tier, it's like at most you could argue end of B tier, but for me, especially based on pick rates and the fact that I think when Hayes has been picked, I don't think Hayes has actually really won much overall in the last few weeks. For me, I feel like you got to put Hayes in C tier. That's where I'm at right now.
I mean, my only caveat to this though that makes me kind of think about the end of B tier for Hayes is just that I think in ranked it can be much more effective because of the like these big open empty areas of the map and the ability to gank and show up behind objectives. I think Hayes does tend to shine in those circumstances. But like you're saying, in professional play, competitive play, that's like, sort of few and far between. But I do think there's maybe some place for Hayes. But again, it's a really a quibble between, mediocre or weak, the way I see these tiers. And honestly, you're right. I think Hayes, like her limited, being so limited in what she offers the team, and sort of, especially with the new ultimate being really focused on the spirit damage build, we see at least at the top level. I think is a little bit less effective than the peak of Hayes with like the ricochet silencer craziness. So yeah, maybe for now, still weak, but I do think it's worth noting that for ranked players playing Hayes, I think you absolutely can make this hero kind of snowball out of control if you really know what you're doing, but maybe it's not as consistent as some of these other top choices.
You know what? You've convinced me. You've arm twisted me enough that I'm on the level bottom of B tier for Hayes. Like just because, also the fact that she could rise, like with the new map, like being more focused on being sneaky. The fact that you could smoke bomb around and otherwise, like maybe there's a gameplay flow that Hayes is going to be good at. That beyond just players like Play With Me or Goober that have kind of made it their own special thing, right? I think she could be rising. So you know what? We'll get out of the Dynamo McGinnis tier. I think bottom of B right now. I'm good with it.
All right, let's go for a very high tier hero here. I'm even wondering, do we need to make an additional entrant into S for Mirage? What do you think about that, CP? Is that I mean, Mirage is very unique. It's very hard to classify as a hero, but he's got incredible carry potential in the late game. He's got pretty decent utility in the tornado that can also serve as a great escape. And then of course the ultimate, the global presence from the ultimate. I think there's a little bit less of like the pure split pushing on a side lane, but now it's so difficult to get from lane to lane naturally that having somebody like Mirage could be extra value. Maybe, I mean, S feels like a lot though. The thing about the heroes in S are really game dominators right now.
They are. I mean, I would almost say between Kelvin and Wraith, but it's also hard because, like, I would say in all of Deadlock, the most consistent hero at first pick, first ban, no matter the region, no matter the circumstance, has been Mirage.
Yeah.
Like, it's too hard to deny.
I think he's above Kelvin.
For...
I think he's above Kelvin. I'm gonna go on record with that. I think Mirage is still just like for how durably strong he is. I think he's really great in pubs too. I think it just has a great gun, very powerful. I mean, I guess maybe he's hurt a little bit by being often a side laner in previous patches. And so we'll have to see like in a few weeks how this like new map bears out and where people are deploying him and like how they're going to elect to use him. But I think in the end, Mirage just has an insane snowball carry potential and is the global presence, even on the new map with like less zip lines to do tech on. Really valuable having that global teleport to get in and out of these situations.
Here's a controversial one because there's very different views on where to value him, but was still like often picked. Though I think there were a few drafts where he wasn't either picked nor banned. Where's Warden? Like, if you're looking at Pacific, Warden is like top of A tier because they super ultra mega valued Warden, though it was on the old map. Warden still was like pretty well valued in EU and NA, and it's still like a hero that people go to. But I'm almost wondering here is like pain. Like, what is your pain threshold when you don't get Warden, or like what is he enabling? It's like you never feel bad that Warden is in your comp for the most part, but I feel like when I look at some of the other heroes in A tier right now, there's an element of, oh god, even the Mo, for example, right, where melee creeps like picked the Mo and like crushed the game with it. Yeah, I almost feel like Warden is like back of A maybe.
Yeah, it's that's where he is for sure for me, is like the end of A or the top of B, but then putting Warden in B tier just feels wrong. I mean, this character has insane potential. In theory, this new map should open up, I think, like, Warden wasn't going to gank on like minute 2, right? Like that's not really his style. He was a little bit farm up and then more of the mid game, the ganking goes on. And I feel like that play style in theory to me makes a ton of sense on the new map where there's less objectives to stop your progress. There's more jungle to be stealing and, turning that into a gank attempt on a lane. And that's the timing that I think Warden wants to hit and wants to be really scaling on. So I feel in theory he should be really good on this map. But like you're saying, the pick prio like just a little bit lower.
Actually, the interesting thing is that while Pacific loved Warden, it was pick ban like highly in every game.
Yeah, that was
I think Pacific jaded me a little bit relative to UNA this week, where he was it was way less across both EU and NA in terms of Warden pick and ban priorities. So,
maybe he's a little bit more top of B.
Yeah, I mean, also though, with the, it's so hard that like it feels bad to say B tier, but I don't know. Then again, you think about where Abrams is getting picked, and you know what? I'll be controversial as much as I hate it internally, but we'll do Warden top of B for now. It might change next week, but here's the one close to your heart. Because Viscous fell off the map in EU and NA. And you're the biggest Viscous enjoyer, and you're going to go to bat. So I just, my love in Warden has now gone down to B. Viscous, is Viscous still A tier where people are valuing Viscous right now? Or if people just lost their minds? Like, because at one point you could make the argument for Viscous being S if you go back like, a month. But
I think Viscous has lost out big time on this patch, honestly. Like, my I wanted him to be really good, and I wanted it to work. I wasn't sure. Like, it felt to me like they had somehow changed the puddle punch self momentum. Like, it was a little bit
Hmm.
weaker than before. Like, the ability to go super warp speed off of just one puddle punch. Uh, so I'm not. I don't know if they actually changed that, or if it's just like something in my head because there's like new gun sounds and things like that. But I have just felt, maybe it's like all the jump pads and the increased verticality. It feels like there's less places where the goo ball is like dominating. I think also Viscous really was thriving in the previous map on, like, yeah, there's towers and objectives, but you just don't care. You just like roll in under the walker and just dive people with the goo ball,
Yeah.
like, at minute 10 or something. And I feel that that's not as important anymore. Like, other heroes can also gank. So yeah, I also feel the same. I feel Viscous is not nearly as good this patch as he was previously.
So what do you think here? I still think his overall potential is still good. I would put it between like Warden and Shiv right now.
Yeah,
From what
yeah.
we've
I
seen
think
on
he
Pick, right?
he can definitely do super well. In my games, I build some like crazy spirit scaling stuff that I've had some good games with that, and sort of played as like a semi carry and steal the enemy jungle all the time, which probably could be a good place to offer Viscous with his ability to get out of those dangerous situations more consistently than others. Um, but you're right. I mean, I think he's definitely lost prio from previous weeks, and I think the map, it kind of speaks to the map. We talked about the map's less congested. There's more freedom of movement, and Viscous doesn't like that. Viscous wants the enemy team to be trapped in a small corridor and just being rolled to death in a little room. And I feel like that's a little bit less common of a scenario in this new patch. I think there's definitely still a way, and the hero still has a lot of potency, which is befitting the heroes in B tier. Like, they can absolutely work. They can have a big game. They can fit in the right comp, but I don't think they're going to be defining your strategy. It's more like rounding it out, which is as all of our favorite heroes are down in B tier. This is an unbiased tier list, though. We're doing our best for the people.
That's right. That's right. We were trying to bias away, what is the actual real details? And okay, here's the real details. And this one I've been fighting internally, but I think it's about time to bring it up. Where's Lash? Because a few weeks back, Lash is definitely no higher for B than me. But
Yeah.
the new map, I feel like, has changed his value significantly based on like where people are picking him. I mean, dear Lord, TF2 Boomers like first picked him, and he got played more, I believe, this week than I think he's been played in the past. If
I
he
think
does
he's A
go
tier.
eight, yeah,
I think he's A tier. Just a question of where in the A tier is the challenge. I mean, I think it's probably like middle. I'm trying to think how.
I think still behind Paradox. I don't. It's hard to say. I guess some people would make the argument him over Paradox. He did get picked over Paradox in a few of the games, right? I don't know how much of that though is just like overreactions to the map and where it's at. I almost feel like if you consider history, it has to be. I would put between Paradox and Greytown. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think right around Paradox feels right to me. I do think Holiday is definitively the better of this like initiator, but Lash, where I compare Paradox or sorry, Paradox, Holiday and Paradox
There's
like
no
one
hair.
to one a lot of the time, I feel Lash is a little bit more removed from those two. It's sort of similar, but has more of like a team fight focus than the individual solo pickoffs. And Lash still insane at that. A lot of vertical mobility on this map, and I think people are most likely yet to really figure out what's the best way to really make use of Lash. And how can he be scaled? Maybe with all this verticality, it's going to like continue to scale. People are going to, prio him even higher. But I think about here in the middle of A tier is like very solid right now, but not hard taking over the game. For the most part, I think not going to go in like the very first couple picks.
Yeah, and speaking of not going the first couple of picks and like something that kind of gets picked up in well, I guess we need to play it. And well, to get more play in Pacific, in Furnace, he's not A tier, right? Like there's no way. Not right now.
Yeah, I think for me, I think top of B though. I mean, maybe with Warden and Shiv, it's kind of a tough call. I think it's probably similar placement to those characters. It does get picked, but it just doesn't go early. It's not a high prio choice. I mean, in theory, you can like scale harder to the late game, but I think there's just like bigger threats in the late game, and like better lockdown skills. Where in the past, I think Infernus was used to counter metas with like, you've got the Warden and is super tanky and Shiv super tanky and Abrams super tanky. And like, okay, Infernus can actually get through those huge health pools and grind out long fights. But you think about everyone else in B tier, there's a lot of burst damage in B tier. or rather, sorry, in A tier. There's a lot of burst damage in A tier and S tier. And so Infernus, I think the team fights are a little bit too explosive for him right now. Pardon the pun, even for Infernus. So yeah, I'd say I like him in high B somewhere.
Yeah, I would say probably behind Warden, but maybe ahead of
Yeah.
Viscous because he has been picked more than Viscous recently.
Yeah,
too.
I'm with that. I'm with that.
Okay, your next go. We got 4 heroes left.
Let's
Who
do
you picking?
Vindicta. I think I was looking at the new map and I just felt, oh, Vindicta could be insane here. There's a lot of like roofs to fly over and a lot of sniping angles, but maybe it's less open and you can't like snipe across the map the way you could in the previous map as easily. I don't know. What do you think about Vindicta right now, ZP?
I think the way people are playing her, it feels like she got weaker. With 4 lanes, she was just constantly roaming, always like lane to lane to lane as soon as she hit 3K, and it was very active. We're getting less fights in the window that she used to power spike really heavily in. Is what
that
I'm
makes
seeing
sense
right now.
because people get their ults online and they aren't immediately ganking with ults the way I think they were in the last patches. Maybe you have to stay in the lane and keep farming, keep trying to defend or push the other team's guardian in your lane. And so maybe Vindicta is not hitting that crazy enabling. She's not worth enabling the way she was in previous games where people were putting all the resources into Vindicta and relying on her snowballing with max ult.
I think she's also worse right now with people really highly valuing Grey Talon because, like, if you don't pick both Talon and Vindicta together, which we did see in one game, which was pretty effective, but if you don't have them together and you have to, like, deal with a Talon as Vindicta, I think it sucks. Like, I actually think it is really painful because you're not getting the early snowball and you're getting hit by, like, gigantic Talon hits anytime you go into the air. So, I don't know. I combine all this, the fact that, like, she lost some of her snowball potential with, how it takes a little bit longer to get into full team fighting, and the fact that like Talon is really good right now. I would almost say be like ahead of Infernus, but like
yeah, I like that actually. I was thinking the same thing. I think the vertical mobility is still super valuable on this map, but the meta overall and you know I think she might need some adjustments tuning wise based on her old power spike was all about people like hard maxing the ultimate and then like playing for snowballing off the back of that. And people are going to need to probably find a new way to approach the hero in the playstyle. But I think Vindicta's been one of the most durable heroes, not because of her like being ridiculously overpowered, but she just had very different playstyles and builds. We've seen like the sort of Echo Shard, rescue beam, like semi-support Vindicta, like double locking people down in the Alk Fire. That's been really good. We've seen the full carry sniping build. We've seen a gun build. I mean, there's really a lot of different builds that have grown in popularity for Vindicta. So I think she's definitely a hero I have my eyes on. I think for people playing in pubs, it's something to experiment with and try to find the build that really takes her to the next level this patch. But I agree with you. I think as she stands now, not quite in the A tier.
All right, I'm gonna hit you counter with the controversial one here because I feel like Ivy is like kind of straightforward. She has to go somewhere in A, behind Kelvin, obviously, but used in too many things, right? But Pocket is an interesting one because when Pocket gets played, I feel like Pocket has actually been pretty effective, but he's not someone that gets targeted, very often. Like it's just not Pocket. We don't see as truly big of a priority, but they also don't feel bad when they're played. So that one.
I think Pocket is A tier. I think we've got to. I mean, just the nature. I think Pocket's like the most unique hero in Deadlock in terms of like playstyle and like the way you just execute the character is like really crazy out there compared to like on the item builds and all the skills. I mean, there's so much tech on this hero. When I rate Pocket, I want to rate him from the perspective of like, what can a really good player do with Pocket? Like, if you know what you're doing on Pocket, if I play Pocket, we can put it right in D tier because I don't know what is going on that hero. But if you watch when he's really good, who's really pushing the limit on the character, it feels like there should be a lot of opportunities for stealing the enemy jungle on Pocket in this map. I mean, for like playing your way out of things with jump pads. Like, I just feel my vibe check is that Pocket should be A tier this patch. But it's just so challenging to rate because even among pro teams, not all of them like love to play Pocket and want to emphasize it and make it a key part of their kit. But I think the good Pockets are still having big games and are still, just being this high skill of a character and like that much sort of juking potential, outplay potential. It's hard to imagine Pocket for me not being A tier right now.
Yeah, I guess the question is that I wouldn't really want to put it ahead of most of the heroes we have set there.
I put him relatively low on A tier, like maybe above Yamato. What do you think about that?
I think above Yamato, behind Calico. That seems pretty good to me.
Yeah,
and also on Ivy, like I said behind Kelly, I just meant in general. I think Ivy is still like behind like some.
I think
Ivy's definitely
below
behind
Mo.
guys.
Yes. That's where I've got. That's where I've got Ivy is like below Mo.
I agree with that actually. Like that actually seems like the most ideal spot
I'm
to go
wondering if
here.
we put Calico too low. You know what? We put her there. We got to move on. We can't
But
be
yeah,
can't
but
be.
no, but that's right.
Well, you know, we put an asterisk on the tier list, guys. We'll be back next week for some more. So you can let us know in the comments if you disagree with any of these placements. But we got to close out with Viper, everybody's favorite sneaky snake.
I hate to say it, Jake, and production cat called us such as like, well, you can't leave D completely absent. It's like,
Oh,
yeah, no, I think especially it hurts too because like one of the key producers behind the scenes, Hex is he's from Wisconsin, and Viper seems to be from the voice lines also from Wisconsin, or at least the voice actress was, but you hate to see it. I don't know.
I'm gonna
just
rush Tesla bullets on Viper in my pubs, and I'm gonna make this character work. That's what I'm gonna do, ZP. I'm gonna resurrect Viper.
Good. Someone needs to. Someone needs to prove that Viper is viable. And who knows? We're evaluating this week by week, Jake. So if the pro scene adapts and people figure out like the new, just godly Viper build, you know what? We'll be the first ones here next week to be like, guess what? Viper's back. But right now, Viper's not back. Viper's in D tier. There's nothing.
Yeah,
we can
I mean,
do
you think
about
of it from this tier list, like there's a lot of stuns in the top two tiers. In general, a lot of stuns in Deadlock right now that you've got to be worried about. And I think Viper is very vulnerable to high level play focus fire, right? If you just like hard stun control this character and focus it with everything, there's not really much you can do on Viper because you kind of have to be in the thick of it. You have to be brawling it out, and you really want to be sliding, and the stuns kind of ruin that for you. And so most of the other characters, either they're long range, they're harder to catch in terms of the top tier, or they're super tanky or have hard escapes or hard blocks of CC, especially for this like sort of carry role that Viper tends to occupy, where you're going to get a lot of farm and you're expected to do a lot. It feels like being vulnerable to being focus fired is kind of a big problem for that role. But I do think Viper can work. I think maybe not a top tier pick in the high level player and pro play, but I think it's something in pubs too. If you get crazy farmed on Viper, your team is helping you out, or you just get like wildly ahead, snowballing. Maybe there's a way to make it work. But I agree with you. But I think she's got to go in D tier for now. Much as I hate to see it, Viper is a lot of fun to play.
Well, Jake, this is our first crack at. Obviously, it's a little bit of a longer video than what we'll have as we update it, because next week we get to start with this as our baseline and be like, okay, what are we changing from what we saw? But honestly, especially with the focus being on like pro and competitive play, I feel this is pretty reflective, especially of the last week of play we just saw.
Yeah, this is a great place to start. And thank you everybody for watching, for checking out this episode of Between Rounds as we jump into our first hero tier list. We're going to be back every week doing some more hero tier lists. So if you want to stay updated on what the top heroes are in Deadlock right now, what the pros are doing, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you notify when these videos go live and check them out. Also, be sure to let us know in the comments like what more you want to see in general from Between Rounds, what different types of content, guests, etc., segments, anything you can imagine. Ask for it, and if it's possible, we'll think about it. Your suggestions will be taken under advisement. But that'll be all for this segment of Between Rounds. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you in the next one.